That's monitored. We don't want the monitor on. Well, let's see.
Memories of John McCollum. July 16th, 1980. Moving.
I am John McCollum, recording memories of my early childhood, July 17, 1980. One anecdote I remember, my mother was very religious, especially while we kids were growing up. But in later years, I would discuss religion with her, and I never tried to berate her religion, but sometime later she was talking with Vashti, and she said, well, John has had advantage of schooling that she never had, and that she knew that he was right, but religion was all she knew, and she would have to go along with it. A neighbor, Charlie Daly, was very ill, and the minister called upon him to convert him to religion. And the minister told Mr. Daly that he would have to banish the devil and embrace the Lord. Whereupon Mr. Daly replied, well, now, listen here, Reverend, says, I don't think a man in my condition can afford to make any enemies.
Why don't you describe Granddaddy Dan? What was he like?
Well, let's see what...
Your great granddaddy Dan?
Mm-hmm.
And you the one that went around and collected money for the school down there?
How tall was he? Was he a tall man, short man, striding physically?
No, just average size. He was tall.
He was a shorter man than you were.
Yes.
You don't remember his wife,
No.
your great-grandmother?
I was born in January, and I think she died in April. My grandfather Dan was not the oldest in his family. He was second oldest. An older brother died about a year after the family moved to Arkansas. But when the Civil War came on, he volunteered at the age 16. He spent 4 years in the war, and he fired his gun once. He shot at a tree. He wasn't angry at anyone, and I doubt if he hit the tree.
Who did he marry? What was his wife?
She was a Strickland. My grandmother, a widow, lived next to my grandfather's folks.
Now what grade was
And sometime after he returned from the war, as a matter of fact, 5 years, he did work for this neighbor and finally married her. She was a Strickland, Strickland. They had 4 children, but 2 died very young. Only my father and his sister, 3 years younger than he, survived. Perhaps as a result of his war experience, my grandfather was an extreme pacifist. He never had any use for a gun except to break it over a stump.
It's part of the Strickland place, part of the home place?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the story about when he was coming home from.
Tell him about coming home from the Civil War.
My grandfather was very widely read. He took a number of newspapers and read them thoroughly, and was a very well-informed man, especially on current events. Let's see, where was he mustered out? At Marshall, Texas, I think. At the end of the Civil War, he was mustered out of service at Marshall, Texas, which was 200 miles from home. He was given a government mule, that is, to ride home. And when he got home, he had to turn the mule loose because the mule was branded with the U.S. Army brand, and therefore he couldn't possess Army property.
What was his expression about being stubborn as a government?
Anyway, after that experience, one of his favorite expressions was that someone was stubborn as a government mule.
What about did they recognize him when they got home?
Yes. It's my great-grandfather that wasn't recognized.
Oh, that's Pascal?
No, Newton.
Was he in the Civil War?
Yes. You want that story?
Yeah.
Another of my relatives in the Civil War was my great-grandfather Newton. Billy Newton, they called him. His family knew that he would return soon after the war, and his oldest 2 children would go down to the highway, that is for those days, and watch for his return. The house was quite a little ways off the main road. One day they noticed an old, poorly dressed, unshaven tramp coming up the road, so they hid out until he was passed. Well, finally they went up the house, and by that time he had time to shave and wash up and get dressed up. When they returned home, there was their father.
Did you ever know him? Did you ever meet him?
Yes, I knew him.
But you don't know enough to make any sketch of him or what he was like?
Well, I've seen his pictures.
Oh, but you don't know much about it.
No.
About Granddaddy Dan, you used to talk about how people come around.
All right, just a minute on the two of those two children that of his oldest two children that went down to the road to intercept him was the oldest boy, and the next oldest child, my grandmother.
Grandma Daisy?
No, grandmother passed.
Grandma Pascal. Why don't you say
But they weren't having any of that old tramp.
Tell that story. I knew Grandma Pascal. That'd be my great grandmother.
The two children that met my great grandfather was the two oldest, Uncle Joe and my grandmother. But they weren't having anything of that old tramp.
Interested, indicated that was your grandmother Pascal. Her name was Newton, but that she was your grandmother Pascal. Why don't you say that? Then I'll know who she is.
I said my grandmother Pascal, who was a Newton.
I used to talk about Granddaddy Dan and what he would do when there were political people coming around and how he handled people trying to hustle his vote.
Back in the days of my grandfather, the politicians controlled the state by having representatives in the various communities who would go to Little Rock and get the information that the politicians wanted them to have so they could return to their respective communities and inform the people about who to vote for and any other issues of the day. The fellow in the community who was the political representative of his politicians was Mr. Will Cochran. He returned one time with a message that he was supposed to get across, but he made the mistake of visiting my grandfather. And on this occasion, everybody was supposed to sign a petition. When my grandfather looked over the petition, he said he wouldn't sign it and told him why, and he predicted what would happen. Well, as it turned out, my grandfather was right. Anyway, after that, Mr. Cochran always consulted my grandfather before he tried to convince the neighborhood. My grandfather had the ability to find out everything about someone else without divulging any information about himself. We had a new farm advisor in the county who happened to visit our place, and this farm advisor said later, says in the first 15 minutes after visiting with my grandfather, that my grandfather had found out all about him and he hadn't found out nothing about my grandfather.
did he live and when did he die? Or can you have any other stories about it?
Well, he had the ability to stir up people.
Yeah, tell that. Think of an instance where he got somebody all riled
Yes.
up.
My grandfather had the uncanny ability to get someone else talking or excited, but only by putting in a little question here and there. On one occasion at a political meeting, Mr. Sanders was ranting, and someone asked, what in the world was the matter with Mr. Sanders? Oh, there's nothing wrong with him. Mr. McCollum just had him going. He had the way of, after he'd get going a while on some subject, he had the ability to put in just a little question that he knew would excite him, and here he'd go again. Let's see.
Was he doing any farming when you first met him? Or was he really retired?
Well, he worked around the house, around the farm, but he was quite crippled up with rheumatism and couldn't do much.
Well, why don't you tell about that?
In his later years, my grandfather McCollum was seriously crippled by arthritis, or rheumatism as it was called in those days, and wasn't able to do much. However, he did what he could around the farm. He even picked cotton when my father made a cotton picker that he could sit on and push himself down the row.
How old was he when he died, or do you know that, or
79,
do you know what year he died?
1925. Grandfather Mac married in his late 20s. Well, I guess he was married at 25, but he was 30 years older than my father. My father's 30 years older than I am. My grandfather died in 1975.
Your father died.
No, I beg your pardon. My grandfather died in 1925 while I was away at college. My father lived to be 90 and died in 1965.
He died a month before you were born, Dan. Just past his 90th birthday.
Danny, we went down to the funeral, and on the way back, we stopped at an antique shop near Little Rock. And there's a great big old baby buggy there. It was called a mountain baby buggy. It would have held about a half a dozen buggies. And so I had Dan pose with that mountain baby buggy. Took his picture. I think Dan wanted to buy that mountain baby buggy. Well, you'd have had plenty of room in that.
What about your other grandparents? There was Grandma Pascal And her husband, did you know him?
Who?
Grandpa?
My grandfather Pascal lived at Calhoun, Arkansas, about 6 miles east of Magnolia. We didn't see my Pascal grandparents very often, but we did manage to visit them occasionally.
How about Grandma's story about crossing the river?
On one occasion, we had visited my grandparents. Well, I guess we were on the way to visit them, and one of the streams had risen after a sudden rainfall. So my father drove the wagon through empty first to see if he could make it. Then they drove the wagon back through and picked up the family. But the second time, the water took the wagon down the stream a bit, and we were stuck there in the stream. My father had to get out of the wagon and hold the horse's head out of the water to keep it from drowning, and we clung to parts of the wagon until we finally did get out. But it was a harrowing experience. Well, at that time there were about 5 of us kids, and on the way back home they decided to have our pictures made. My grandfather Pascal had a little farm, but he didn't do much farming. He had black family living on the farm that did most of the farming and odd jobs around the place. But he ran a cotton gin and sawmill combination. Also, I think he even had a grist mill with it. He had 2 sons and 2 daughters. My mother was the oldest. Then came the 2 sons, and my aunt the youngest.
How was your grandmother like? Grandma Pascal?
My grandmother Pascal was rather quiet, mousy. They said she was very beautiful when young. My grandfather was fairly quiet, all business, not too good a sense of humor, I don't think. I never tried him. My grandfather McCollum appreciated a good pocket knife. And when he went to buy a pocket knife, it had to be sharp. His philosophy was that if the company that made it couldn't sharpen it, there was no use of you trying. My grandfather McCollum had a very healthy respect for education. The state had appropriated money for 4 district schools. One of them was supposed to go to Prescott. At least they expected to get it. However, it was to be given to the county that raised the most money for the school. Prescott had already built a building expecting to get the school. But my grandfather rode the county on horseback day and night to collect money for this school, and in the end was able to obtain it for Columbia County. As a result, all but one of his 11 grandsons went to this school. So I guess actually he got his money's worth.
Which one did he go there?
I wouldn't say that my father was an opportunist, but he was not adverse to taking advantage of any information, especially if it was free. At one time he was having trouble with one leg, and my niece, who married an army surgeon, was visiting there along with the doctor. And so my dad asked him what he thought was wrong with his leg. Well, the doctor didn't have his equipment. He couldn't make a diagnosis of his leg, so he finally told Dad, says, "Don't you suppose it's just worn out?" My Dad was in his high 80s at the time. Well, Dad thought a little bit. He says, "Well, no, I don't think that's the trouble, because this other one has gone just as far, and it's all right." My father was a very hard-working man, one of the hardest that I ever knew. But he also insisted that his kids work as well. Maybe that's just as well, because he ran them all off the farm. What they knew of farm work was just a hard way to make a living, so they tried to find some other way of doing it. On rainy days, he always had jobs, like picking off peanuts. So there's never a non-working day, and usually it was 6 days in the week. And we also got up early in the morning. He'd get up real early in the morning while it was still dark, and holla, daylight everywhere.
Wait, keep on going. Tell me about the time you were fishing.
One of my early remembrances of my dad was when I was 4 years old. I had found some fish hooks someplace, and I couldn't be content till I took those hooks down to a little spring stream in our pasture and tried them out. So one day he had told us not to get near that water. Well, one day I had sneaked off down there and was trying to catch fish with those fish hooks. First thing you know, I looked up and there was my father in front of me. I knew that I was in for a thrashing, but he took my fish pole and put a bait on properly and stuck it in the water near a log, and out came a fish. Well, that's all I needed. He went on his way, and I continued until I caught quite a string of fish. That was my first fishing experience, and it was so successful that I've tried it ever since. Well, the crops that were grown on the farm, cotton was the major crop. We also grew corn. We had sorghum, soybeans, sweet potatoes, sugar cane, peanuts. We grew oats, and always a number of garden crops.
Any tobacco?
And no tobacco. He had no use for tobacco. one day a grandson was around selling magazines. And at that time, my father was in his high 80s, and he paged through this magazine that his grandson was selling, and he didn't notice any whiskey or tobacco ads in it. So he decided to sign up for a 10-year subscription.
What was the name of the magazine?
The magazine was The Progressive Farmer. One important decision by my parents was that when they saw so many kids coming, that they decided to put their money into education rather than to leave it for the kids to fight about. My remembrances of family life must have been quite different from that of other people growing up. My father was a very hard worker. He was busy and working all the time, and my mother had so many children that she was awfully busy, so the children more or less just had to raise each other, and it was quite a burden on the older ones to take care of the younger ones.
How'd they get along?
But they seemed to get along quite well. Very little troubles in the family. Few little fusses here and there, but nothing of major importance. When we were growing up, I thought my parents were quite strict. So on later years, when the grandchildren began to come back home, my father, instead of being strict with them, allowed them to do anything. The grandchildren could do no wrong, which was quite a contrast with the way his children were raised. So you can readily imagine that he was a hero to his grandchildren, much more so than he was to his own children. When I was young and cotton was the main crop, we had quite a number of black families on the place. And as I recall, my father leaned over backwards to be honest with everyone, especially people who were working for him. In later years, when he was seriously injured by being either kicked or stepped on by a mule and was in the hospital, at least 200 black people came to the hospital to wish him well. I started school when I was only 5. I guess it wasn't well, let's see. I guess the folks didn't need any more kids at home, so they just sent us to school. My early schooling was in a one-room schoolhouse, all 8 grades in one room. I only went to the school until I was in through the 3rd grade. Then we moved to another school where there were 2 rooms and 2 teachers. And I went to that only 1 year, then to another school where there were a larger school where there were 2 rooms and 2 teachers. But when I was in the 3rd grade, early part of World War II, World War I, the black families on the farm moved off to do war work, and Dad sold his mules that were used for farming and bought a tractor. And although I was only 12 years old at the time, I had to run the machinery. And for the next 2 or 3 years, I went to school part of the time, but ran that machinery, my older brother being off to high school. And so I didn't start to high school until I was 16. I finished high school then in 3 years at the 3rd District Agricultural School at Magnolia. From there I went to Oklahoma State University, which was Oklahoma A&M College at the time, and spent 3 years to get a BS degree in agriculture there. Then I went to Cornell University to take graduate work. I spent 2 years in graduate school with an assistantship, during which time I completed my coursework and got my prelim off. I took a job then at the Long Island Vegetable Research Station at Riverhead on Long Island. Was there a year and a half, returned to Cornell for another half-year study, then took a job at Illinois before I had completed my thesis. I worked out my PhD thesis at the University of Illinois and returned to Cornell for my PhD in 1932. I was asked how I met Vashta. We were in Cornell at the same time, that is 1 year. When I took the job out of Illinois, she followed a year or two later to enter law school. I heard that there was a former Cornell co-ed there, so I decided I wanted to meet her and arranged to do so.